All right, so we have a new poll, a YouGov poll that just came out of Germany. And if these numbers are indicative of what might happen, and if we see more polls that kind of reflect this trend, then we might be seeing some big changes happening in Germany that could affect how the coalitions look or where we're heading in this election. So a new YouGov poll just dropped, and the Christian Democrats are now down to 27%. That is low. They're closer to 25% now than they were 30%. Now, in all the other polls, they're still showing around 30%. So we'll see if we see a dip in some other polls. But this poll was out in the field on the 14th to the 17th. Was released today, over 2,000 respondents as well. So it's a decent poll. It's an online poll because it is a YouGov poll, but it does show the Christian Democrats starting to slide. Now, the Social Democrats went up 1% in that poll, but with these numbers kind of going down for the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats not moving, it's looking more and more like we're going to be headed toward a Kenya coalition. Now, if you don't know about the German coalitions, go ahead and look at my previous video that I did about the German election, where I go ahead and break down the coalitions. It's looking more and more and more like a possible, it's coming to the point where the Grand Coalition just does not seem like it's feasible. There's just not going to be enough seats. And especially if we see the Christian Democrats doing well on the constituency level, but just not doing well when it comes to the overall vote, as far as the list vote is concerned, then yeah, they might suffer. Now, in that last video I did about the recent polls back then, I talked about how the left was rising and saying, hey, listen, should we be looking at the Sarah Wagenknecht party that she has, or the left party because she broke off from that party? Now the left party in this poll has shot up. They're at 9%, which is the highest they have ever been in the YouGov poll, or maybe even in any poll, but the highest that they've been in the YouGov poll since the last election. So we are seeing the left starting to move up. And what kind of impact does that have? Because at 9%, now you look at them having a lot more of the proportional representation vote when it comes to the country. Now, let's go ahead and look at what the poll says and just break down some of the crosstabs. So if we go ahead and look at the poll right here, as I mentioned before, we see the Christian Democrats at 27%, down 2% from the last poll that they had, where they were at 29%, which is one of the lowest polls that they have. The AfD is staying at 20%, but did go down 1%. The Social Democrats up by 1%. The Greens, pretty much even. They haven't seen any movement. As I mentioned, the left party is up by 3%. So that is a huge, huge shift. Again, I don't know if it means more constituencies might be going their way, but it definitely means more of the proportional representation vote might be going their way. And the Sarah Wagenknecht party sticking there at 5%. Not much of a movement. Now, according to the YouGov poll, they did say that 29% of those who say they're going to vote for the left in this poll are not 100% sure, that they could change their mind. And as we see right here, if they do change their mind, those votes go significantly to the left. So you see the Sarah Wagenknecht party at 26%, the Greens at 20%, and the SPD at 19%. Now, the reason why I think this is important, because I think there's a lot of people, and this is kind of the case, there are a lot of people out there who think that the far left and the far right are kind of converging at some points. That it's like you don't have this regular spectrum anymore. It's kind of like a circular spectrum that the extremes can kind of meet on some certain things. I don't think that the left party is occupying that extreme left anymore. Now with the Sarah Wagenknecht party in there now, I think, and again, that's not how to pronounce it. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name, but I think that's where you see the convergence of, let's say, the AfD and the left, or the far left, I guess I should say, as far as ideology. But it's almost like there's some sort of Overton window going on, with Sarah Wagenknecht's party occupying that very far left, alternative left ideology. It's almost as if the left party has kind of moved into a social democratic lane, and the SPD has kind of moved closer to the Christian Democrats. So you are starting to see this Overton window shift in the parties, which is making the left party a little bit more mainstream to some extent. They're not there obviously yet, but I think that by the Wagenknecht party being in there, you are starting to see that. Now, of course, let's go ahead and look at West Germany and East Germany when we look at these votes. Now, I actually did a paper at a political conference about the left party and how they are different between East Germany and West Germany. So one thing that I found in that paper was an election about 15 years ago. So I'm sure a lot of things have changed since then. When you see the supporters from the left in West Germany, they were more social justice warrior type of people, or very far left on certain environmental issues, economic issues, social justice issues, and so on. When you looked at those in East Germany who supported the left party, they were more people who still clung on to this idea of socialism. As a matter of fact, when they asked people, do you have a favorable view of socialism, of those who voted left in that election, the people in the West kind of said no, but the people in the East kind of said yes. So there is this East-West divide in politics, but within the left party itself. So we'll see this, it's not looking as strong as it did before. So let's go ahead and look at West Germany here. We can see the CDU is at 29%. So they're above what the national poll is. The SPD is at 18, along with the AFD. Okay, the Green parties are still at 13, and the left is at 8. So they're 1% down on their national thing. Now, the one thing I think is very interesting in this poll is that even in West Germany, you don't have the Free Democrats above the threshold. In fact, you don't even have them in 5th place in this poll, or 6th place in this poll. And I think that's pretty much where we're gonna see it. Now, I did mention in the last video that, you know, there is one poll that had the Free Democrats at that 5%, but it just seems to be that poll. So it just does not look like they're going to get the threshold at all. So if we look at the East German poll, we can see the Alternative for Germany at 27%, with the Christian Democrats at 23%. Now, you do have the Social Democrats and the left tie at 12%. Now, what I find interesting is, yes, the left is doing significantly better in the East than they are in the West, but not that much so. We're talking about a 4% shift, okay? So to me, this indicates that the party is becoming a little bit maybe more mainstream than in the past. There is still that divide. There is still that split, but still. And then we see Sarah Wagenknecht's party at 9%, and then the Greens down at 7%. Though, when we look at the constituencies, it does look like the Greens will win some seats in Berlin in this election. Now, one of the places where they said that the left party has improved, has done well, and I'm talking about YouGov, is that they've done better in urban areas. So we might start seeing some more constituency go to the left party. Now, the question is, for example, in, let's say, Berlin, where I think the Greens are poised to maybe get 2 seats out of Berlin, could the left party then replace them and pick up those 2 seats instead if we see them rising, particularly in the East? That could be the case. But in the case with the left, yes, they might pick up a few more constituencies, but it's that proportional representation with them at being at 9% that's going to have the real impact. Now, let's go ahead and look at gender. We have men. Men mostly support the Christian Democrats at 27%, with the Alternative for Germany at 23%. I don't think any of these numbers are a surprise. Okay, now if we go look at women, we see that women are with the Christian Democrats as well at 27% as well, same percentage. But we do see the Social Democrats at 2nd, with the AFD at 3rd. The Green Party is 12th, but you have the left party at 10%. So you can see, and the Sarah Wagenknecht at 7%. So you see 17% of female voters are going with those left choices. And the question really comes to, if those two parties can combine to get over 15% of the votes, they could pick up more constituencies, but that definitely helps them in the proportional representation. So we are seeing some possible seismic shifts with not just the Christian Democrats going down, but the left, and I mean maybe even the collective left going up, because the Social Democrats also gained a percentage here. So I think that is something that's quite interesting. Now, if we look at this chart that they have on their website, you can see here the left party is at the highest point that they have been since the last election. Okay, they've gone up pretty significantly. Obviously, not like the AFD, who has gone up quite a bit, but they have gone up, whereas the Greens are going down. And here you basically see the Social Democrats over the last year or so almost being kind of the same. So we will see what the left does. Let's see what they do in some other polls. It might be interesting to see if we see any type of movement. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, and then we're going to look at the age demographic split up a little bit more, but I wanted to point this out here. You can see of those who are between the ages of 18 and 29 years old around the country, around Germany, you can see the left is actually number one with those group of voters at 20%, with the Greens number 2, and then the AFD number 3. So you can see the Christian Democrats are 4 and the Social Democrats are 5. It seems like younger voters, not just in Germany, but in other places, are starting to move away from, maybe not in mass, but they are starting to move away from what I would call the traditional parties. Even in Canada, if you look at the People's Party of Canada, which is a far right party, and then you look at the Green Party, which is a left party, and maybe even the NDP, even though they are an established party, you're seeing more of the younger voters gravitate towards those. I think with the People's Party, that the People's Party's best demographics are with younger voters. So you are seeing a lot of people move away from the traditional parties, which if you watch American politics, this kind of presents a problem as to where the youth vote goes, because all we have is 2 traditional parties. We don't have any alternatives to the parties that we have. All right, so the last thing I want to look at, and I'm just pulling up the poll for this, are the age breakdowns. Now, we already talked about the younger voters going more for the left, for the Greens and the AFD, but I really want to point out this 30 to 49 vote, especially this 40 to 49, because this is something very similar to what we were looking at in the United States. Now, if we look at 30 to 39, you can see the AFD is first place with 23% of the votes. The Christian Democrats are second, the Social Democrats third. And then, these are very close. The Greens are fourth at 14, and then 12% the left. The left does quite well. Now it's this 40 to 49 group. So one thing that we noticed during the last presidential election in the United States is kind of what we would call Generation X in the United States went strongly for Trump. Those people in their 40s went strongly for Trump. And we are starting to see that in Germany, because the AFD does the best with these voters at 26%. That's where they're getting most of their percent. The Christian Democrats are there is doing well with 23%, but you can see the Social Democrats go down tremendously. And I would have to say the Social Democrats are kind of akin to the Democratic Party here in the United States. So the Greens are actually doing significantly better amongst this group than the Social Democrats. But you are seeing these 40 to 49-year-olds really starting to go more toward the hard right parties. Now, when we get to 50 to 59, in the United States, this group is still pretty much a Trump group. But here you can see as we get older, from 50 on up, you do see a lot more voters going with the traditional parties. So you can even see 15% isn't their best, but when we get 60 and older, we see the Social Democrats doing the best amongst those groups. And if we look at the alternative for Germany, we see with 70 and older, they do quite poorly, probably because they remember certain times. But like the 22%, that's not far off from what we have here. But you do see amongst these 50 to 70 or 50 and older voters, you really see these other parties, the left, the Green, Sarah Wagenknecht, you see them really kind of dropping, with the exception of the Free Democrats doing well with older voters. And that makes sense, because older voters are probably used to Free Democrats being part of this establishment of the old political guard in Germany. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. This poll is interesting. Let's see if there are any other polls that kind of show this, but it does show a momentous shift, I think, that we are no longer in grand coalition territory. We are truly in a territory in which there will need to be 3. There might need to be 4. Who knows? I don't think we'll go that far. But if the Green Party doesn't get enough of proportional representation, I mean, can the Green and the left be very close? If they can, then if we're keeping the AFD out of any coalition, this might be a hard one to try to figure out how this goes. I'm still saying the Kenya coalition. We'll see. All right. Thank you all very much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.